Well, it's officially winter here. We had our first snowfall yesterday and it looks so beautiful, but it does mark the end of any fresh flower cuttings from the garden. So I have an idea today for how to use flowers and even any greenery and bring it inside and preserve it throughout the year. This is something that I've been doing for years, and it's so simple. Anyone can do it with household items, some fresh greenery, and a little bit of imagination. It's funny, I remember pressing flowers as a kid. I had one of those little flower press kits, but I distinctly recall in my 20s, Restoration Hardware started to sell beautiful framed botanicals, and that's when it really piqued my interest as a way of creating art. So I couldn't afford the Restoration Hardware version, so I decided to try it myself. So, went and foraged some beautiful flowers and leaves, spray painted IKEA frames black, used black mats, and I got a very similar look, and to this day they are still some of my favorite pieces. I also greatly admire floral artists like Jamie Beck and Rhonda Cole. I love that they use flowers with their various mediums and create gorgeous pieces of art. And so this is my way of creating something for our home that uses flowers that we've grown or found, and really a way to enjoy them throughout the year. There are a few simple things that you're going to want to start with. First, because of the time of year, I've been able to trim some beautiful greens from the garden, but ideally it would be great to have some fresh flowers as well. You do want things that are quite open, so this is an ideal time to use flowers that might be past their prime. Buds don't generally tend to press very well, but if you have something that compresses flat easily, like an open rose or daisy, or even loose leaves like this here, I think this will make a really beautiful pressed piece. You may want to use tape, and this will come in handy when we do the framing techniques. To do the flower pressing itself, it only requires a few things: typical parchment paper, a kitchen staple, a heavy book. So this is a chance to use all of those hardcover coffee table books that you might have. They will be out of commission for several months. It's ideal to let these flowers press uninterrupted for quite some time. So just keep that in mind if it is a book that you like to reference. The key with laying out your flowers, and I'm just going to show you here, you're going to open your book up to about the center. Take your parchment paper. These come pre-folded, but if you do have a larger piece, you may just want to cut a piece yourself. And you're going to lay your flower down the way that you'd like to have it arranged. Now, sometimes when you compress the piece down, you see that maybe there's too many leaves, and it actually would benefit to pull a few away so that you can see more of it. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to remove the ones that I think may end up getting in the way. It's hard to always envision exactly how the pressed flower is going to look once it's dried, but you can get a good sense by just sort of compressing here. And I love that the red color of this particular plant is still going to come through, just in a slightly more faded version over time. I'm going to pull these away at the bottom. So now that I have a sense of what this will look like, you're going to fold your parchment paper over top, so before you actually close the book. And this gives you a chance to, again, just ensure that everything is falling roughly where you'd like it to sit. And then the critical moment is when you commit to that exact arrangement. You're going to close it. You can put something else that's heavy on top or stack these books. I would suggest keeping it to one flower per paper. You don't really want them to touch. They do tend to stick if they're side by side. And then you have to resist the urge to open this over ideally several months. And before you know it, you will end up with something like this. So this was a flower, and you can see the petals have actually fallen off, but I had pressed probably close to a year ago now. So it's been waiting for a frame to go in. These are actually flowers as well that are one of my favorites. And you can see that because we have the three together, it just makes such a beautiful sort of arrangement the way that they've dried. So just being cautious that the front of the flower or the face of the flower is all how you'd like it when you press it, so that you end up with a result like this. For me, I'm not worried about the fading that will happen over time. I think that's part of the inherent beauty of a pressed flower, so I'm actually not going to treat these with anything at all. I'm going to go straight to framing. There are so many different ways to frame your pressed flowers. Depending on the style of the space that it's going in, you may choose to do a more traditional framing, which you can easily find frames like this at antique marts or even thrift stores. As long as they come with that glass front so that the flower can press against it, it would be a great fit for something like this. I also really enjoy using floating frames. So that's where you have all glass, no mat. This one requires a little bit of fine tuning, but it would make a beautiful frame for pressed flower art. Once you've confirmed your frame, then you can move on to matting styles. We have this handmade paper here that's beautiful. It's got a lovely sort of cream color, lots of texture, and would be a really nice neutral backdrop. As a designer, I also have lots of remnants of fabrics and wall coverings, and so I like to use these sorts of pieces for mats in my framed art. This is a lovely grass cloth in a rose color. It has a bit of luminescence, so I think that would be a really lovely material to use here. I also like the look of a more coarse fabric, so it doesn't always have to be a really refined material to make a great mat. This brown burlap would be beautiful and a little bit more rustic, or a fine linen would be lovely as well. So look around, try and be creative and upcycle something that you might already have. If you are looking for a really unique idea, maybe you like the more antique style, you can also pick up an old book, and depending on the size of your frame, use an old page of the book or several and layer that with your matting materials. So you can see that if I were to use a frame like this here with perhaps this lovely grass cloth, you could also add this page from the book and then have your flower on top of it. And this layering is what gives these pieces of art so much interest and really make them one of a kind. I also like that this has this sort of torn edge. It kind of reminds me of that deco edge that you get on handmade paper, and I love that detail. So I'm gonna grab this frame here. I love this with the velvet ribbon on top. And all you need to do is open up your frame, and you're going to roughly lay out how you want those flowers to sit. Now, oftentimes I try to have the stems be longer than I really think I'll need for the framed piece, because it's always easy to trim them after. So in this case, I'd love for it to sit about here, and I'm just going to trim roughly where they hit the bottom of the frame. I may get rid of this little piece here. Now, these frames tend to compress the flower really well, so you don't often have to worry about anything slipping once it's hanging. But as a little detail, sometimes it's nice to add something called washi tape. Now, this washi tape in particular is green. You can get it in all different colors, even beautiful patterned ones. But I like that little bit of contrast, and I think it complements the pink ribbon beautifully. You're just going to use that as a way to secure the stems. Actually, I might break this into two. And you're really recreating the look of an archival tape. So I'm going to stagger them so it has a little bit of interest at the bottom. Position your flowers in a way that you're happy with. And that's really all there is to it. You can see just how quickly this piece of art came together. I'm so glad that I finally have a use for these flowers. Now I always have this way of remembering that beautiful moment in our garden.